encouraging is what we do here on The Edge. Brains, look at that. I got a celebrity right next to me. Our guest today, Madonna Treadway. Let me tell you a little bit about her story. She is a very dynamic author. She's just come out with the release of her brand new book. I'm so excited about it. We get to feature it here on The Edge. There was a great book signing that she did at the Coronado Library. Is that correct?
Yes, as well as a reading.
Right. And inside the pages of this book is a woman that shares her childhood trauma of losing both of her parents by the time she was 8 years old. There was 4 children, and she was the only girl. We want to hear how that's impacted her, why she decided to document it in a book, and also what she's pouring into others to help them get over childhood trauma. So let's welcome our guest on The Edge today, Madonna Treadway. Hello, how are you, beautiful?
I'm good. Thank you very much. And I'm so pleased to be here and have the opportunity to talk about my book and my story, as well as what I offer to my readers. The name The name of my book is 6 Healing Questions, A Gentle Path to Facing Childhood Loss of a Parent.
Now, you know, this is a big conversation that's going on right now because I have several friends in the community that are working with foster care and foster youth and what that looked like. But the trauma behind that, all foster children are not in foster care because their parents passed away. There's a multitude of different reasons. So I want to start with your story and then bring it up to how we can connect that to what's going on right now. Tell us a little bit about what happened in your upbringing.
Well, I had a lovely first almost 6 years, and I had 3 adoring older brothers, 8, 10, and 11 years older than me. And they loved me dearly, almost like a pet, if you really think about it, because I was cute and cuddly. Anyway, 2 of them were away at college. One was still in high school, and my mother got breast cancer. And of course, this was many years ago, and she ended up dying from it. And within a year, my father, they were older when I was born, but my father I always say he had a broken heart, but he actually had a stroke. And he ended up taking his own life. And this all happened by the time I was 8. So you can imagine it was traumatic and difficult for a little child to go through that.
So what happened at that point? Did you guys all get to stay together, or did you go to foster care? Did you go to a family member? Who raised you?
I had a very interesting childhood. 2 of my brothers were in college, as I mentioned, and one was in high school. And my brothers raised me.
Wow.
Babies raising a baby. And they had me on their own for about 2 years.
Wow.
And needless to say, it was kind of exciting. I'm sure I went to school. I have no clue what I looked like, but they knew how to take care of me because my mom had been sick. And so they had chipped in, and they knew how to pull my hair back in a ponytail, feed me, and send me out the door. Now, sometimes this was unusual because when I was 7 and right after my dad died, we moved and I switched schools. And my youngest brother, who was in high school, dropped me off and said, go to school. Now, this meant register yourself. So I walked into, I was always in Catholic schools. You can probably guess from my name that we were a Catholic family. And I walked in, found the principal's office, registered myself. I'm sure the poor nun was sitting there wondering, what the heck is going on here?
Who's this grown woman checking into this?
Yeah. Anyway, I know a lot of people have horror stories about the nuns, but they were wonderful to me. They took care of me. They kept me after school to correct papers. I was a good student, and so I think that helped a lot. And I thought they were wonderful. So that's one kind of interesting, unusual story that a 7-year-old would register herself for school. And I'm pretty sure the reason that social services never stepped in was because I was always in Catholic schools. And by the time I turned about 9, my middle brother got married, and I ended up living with them for the rest of the years that I was in grade school and high school.
So that means that you grew up pretty quick and pretty fast.
Oh yeah, my brothers were wonderful, but they were babies themselves. And I would have to say that I took care of my own emotional needs from the time that my dad died, really. And I mean, even other things, we always seemed to have enough money. That didn't seem to be a problem. But there were things like, I don't know if you were a member of Bluebirds, girls associations kind of thing.
Right.
And I remember having to figure out, they would give me the money, but I had to figure out how to get the uniform, all the things you need for this. I had to figure these things out on my own. And I guess I just assumed that everybody did this.
Right. So tell me when you realized that trauma had set in.
Well, I pretty much ignored it. My family did not talk about it. And this is not a criticism. It's just, I think it was partly the age or the time, and also the fact that my father had taken his own life. Right. That was sort of a family secret, and no one really wanted to talk about it. And I also think that it was kind of a survival mechanism that worked at the time. We all needed to move on, go forward with our lives, which we all did. And all of us ended up being very successful. And until I was 40, I would not talk about it.
Wow.
It was totally buried. I thought that has nothing to do with me. I'm just going to live my life. I'm going to be successful. And when I turned 40, I felt I was fulfilling most of my dreams. Mm-hmm. And I felt like there was something missing. And I went to see a therapist about a totally different issue. Mm-hmm. And her first question to me was, what about your parents? And I said, well, they died before I was 8, but that's all resolved. We don't need to talk about that. Mm-hmm. And she just said, oh. And of course, she was a wonderful therapist. And for the next 5 years, that's what we talked about. And I had no idea how closed off I was from my emotions. I was so used to basically commanding myself to do whatever. Right. If somebody asked me how I was feeling, I told them what I thought. And it was such a habitual pattern that I honestly didn't even really understand.
Do you think that it came off brass or cocky or?
With me?
How do you think people received your frankness?
Well, I'm an MBA, so I was in the business world. So these things really never came up. But with my therapist, I think she understood that I had buried things. And how did that impact you when it came to relationships and love?
Because again, you had to see that demonstrated by your brothers' relationships or outsiders. You really didn't see the relationship between your mom and dad because they passed at an early age. So how did you formulate your skills and navigate your way through love?
I pretty much modeled myself after my brothers, who were also business people. And I had a very bad, and I'm telling you more than I tell in my book. I had a very bad first marriage and ended up with my son, who was 6. I raised him as a single mom. And of course, my emotional life with my son was wonderful.
Right.
But that was actually the reason I ended up going to a therapist. I kept dating these guys that were, they looked good on the outside. They were funny, they were intelligent. And then after about 6 months, nothing was happening for me. And I came to the conclusion with my therapist that they were emotionally unavailable. And I think really the truth was I was emotionally unavailable. And so working with her allowed me to really look at to really make contact with my emotional life. And that was a huge thing. I mean, I'd always had an interior life that I did not express, I did not talk about. I was worried that people would judge me, or or I would be vulnerable because of these terrible things that had happened to me. But as I delved into them with my therapist, what I found was that I was also missing out on a lot of joy.
Right.
And my life really wasn't complete in that way. So, of course, after I worked with her, I did meet my husband and fell in love. And, I don't think that would have happened if I wouldn't have done that.
Well, we all have to do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
But the first step is the realization that there's something going on.
Yes.
Identifying, connecting, and owning. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Brain, you have to own it. Okay, it's yours. It's not mine. It's not Madonna's. It's yours. Okay, so grab hold to it. There's nothing new under the sun, and there is not an individual in the world that has not been through some sort of trauma, some sort of loss, some sort of deception, fear. That is our gauges and our ways to create boundaries and parameters. That is a way to identify. So you decided, after you've went through, these trials and tribulations, growing up, pretty much raising yourself with the assistance of your brothers, going through a bad marriage, some challenges, raising your son as a single parent, finding love. And now you have, you went to a therapist who did some amazing work, and you decided, you know what, I'm going to share this with the world. You wrote a book. Tell us about your book.
Well, first, can I answer your question
Absolutely.
about foster kids?
Yes, please.
Because kids, originally I wrote the book for my demographic, which would be adults who have experienced early childhood loss and have not processed the grief, which is basically what happened to me. And I think it's not that uncommon for that to happen. Mm-hmm. And my second audience were parents or grandparents or foster parents that were raising kids, because I have firsthand experience about what it's like when you feel like basically you're kind of on the outside all the time. You're not with your parents, and it's difficult to relate to your peers, because by the age of 8, for me, example, I had experienced, major trauma and death, and my peers were concerned about their mother being late when they were picking them up. And in my brain, I was going, man, I wish I had my mother.
Right.
So foster kids were definitely one of my thoughts while I was writing this, and I'm hoping to do some work in that arena. The other demographic that I've sort of gotten to accept, because some of my readers have told me this, they have told me that the book is really for anyone who's experiencing loss. The process I put together, and it's interesting that you mentioned first you have to own it. Not only do you have to own it, you have to name it. And the first chapter in my book is how to develop awareness. And I give pointers on doing that. I also have a short seminal story of early loss in each of the chapters. I really feel the book is not so much about me, but it's about how to navigate your way if you have this situation, and how to talk about it so you can heal. Because keeping it inside and not sharing it, it creates problems, and it does. It's difficult.
But there's fear, there's shame associated with that. Mm-hmm. You can't be ashamed of what your parents did or the loss or that's not yours to own. Okay. But again, how you navigate through it and what you do. So tell us about your book. I'm so excited. You had this great book launch here in Coronado in San Diego, which is pretty hoity-toity. The room was full. It was standing room only. And so you got assistance through. Now, did you get assistance through Memoirs? San Diego Writers, Inc.?
Well, what happened with me was several years ago. Well, actually, a year ago, I submitted a piece to I did not know the format of my book. The book is basically a self-help book. And originally, I didn't know the format. And I ended up in Marnie Friedman's memoir class. And that was where I crafted the seminal stories that went into each chapter. And so last year, I submitted a piece for the memoir showcase. The theme last year was secrets, and they picked 10 to be put on stage by worked with an editor and a producer, and then an actor portrays it, and one of mine got chosen. And so that was how I got started with them. And then I realized that the book is really more about self-help. I started doing research, and I became fascinated about the information that was out there about what happens to people who have this happen to them. And in my book, I also, in addition to it's loaded with research, but I also have a section called Now I Think. And that is me at the age I'm at right now, looking back at what happened to me, which is I think is pretty helpful. And I was wondering if I could read one of those seminal stories.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let me get ready. Let me get my head around this. Brains,
okay.
Close attention, because this is speaking to you. This is speaking to somebody. The 46,000 people in 38 countries. This is speaking to you. Okay. I want you to listen, take note, own it, take responsibility, and see how we can move forward. Can you please read for us, Madonna?
I would love to. Thank you, April. I need my reading glasses.
And I took mine off.
This is in my first chapter on developing awareness. The title is A Vivid Memory of Rose. My mother Rose sits on our maroon velour couch with me sideways on her lap like a baby, one of her hands cradling my back. I am 6, not a baby anymore, yet liking my place on her lap as well as my place as baby of the family. My mother is a short woman with beautiful curly auburn hair, almond-shaped eyes, and an ample, comfy lap. I never thought of her as being beautiful then, yet looking back, I see that she was. She looks into my eyes, silently asking for my attention, and whispers gently to me, I will be taking a train to Minot. I need to see the doctor, and I will be gone for a while. I shiver a little and cry while caving into her. Mama, I don't want you to go. She was trying to sound calm, yet I was alarmed. My mother rarely left on her own, and the tone of her voice and her serious eyes scared me. She could tell I did not want her to go. Fear was overtaking me when she leaned in, promising with words smooth and soft as velvet, I'll be back in just a little while. Mom broke her promise. She never returned home. She died of cancer in St. Leo's Hospital in Minot, North Dakota, soon after she entered the hospital in the spring of 1956. Now I think. My entire world changed when my mother died. The world I knew was no more. There were empty spaces where there had been connection and a warm, comfy lap. Our kitchen, where my mother had concocted cakes, sweets, and wonderful smells, now seemed empty and cold. Within days, that room became strictly utilitarian. No more cake batter or frosting bowls to lick. No longer a place of childhood fascination and lingering close to my mother's apron. The kitchen became a place of loss, a place to avoid in case I too might be lost in some inexplicable, unexpected way. Who would know that this loss and abandonment was even possible at the age of 6? I felt disowned and angry. It would be years before I would talk about my mother. Somehow I felt that Rose decided to leave me, and I wanted nothing to do with her. She was the worst mother because she teased me with her warmth and love, and then she was gone. She was discounted in my eyes. For many years of my life, I wasn't aware that I was carrying this heavy weight of loss and sadness. In fact, acknowledgement of this wound was unfathomable until I was in my mid-40s. As I look back on it now, I realize that I thought if I ignored her memory, I would be able to move forward without the trouble of understanding or bringing up any painful feelings. I did not even want to give her that. When a therapist asked about my mother, I remembered explaining that it was all resolved and I did not need to talk about it. Of course, in the 5 years of therapy that followed, my relationship with my mother evolved. What I had been carrying around with me found its way to the surface. With awareness, I was slowly able to acknowledge feelings of guilt, anger, and a cavernous amount of loss.
You know, there's so much to be uncovered and discovered in loss. You find yourself in loss. You recognize pain. As I said, you establish boundaries. You confront fear and anger. There's so many metamorphoses of change that your body goes through, your mind goes through. So now you're having this book, and it is for people that have, suffered loss at an early age, maybe children that have been in foster care or going through that, or people just don't want to identify. But when you're trapped in this place of post-traumatic stress disorder, mm-hmm. and you face it head on, what would you say to a person that's at that crossroads right now? Some people take very desperate options and choices. They drink, they do drugs, they commit suicide, they become abusive to others, they're verbally abusive. They just can't get their head around it. What would you say would be a first step?
Well, first, I would suggest seeing a therapist. I think that would be a must. But I also think that just kind of coming to terms with the fact of what happened in your life. And I know the feeling of shame and abandonment. And yet what happened for me when I faced these things was I became very aware of the opposite side of it.
Right.
Like, for example, I'm really independent. People who have these experiences develop resilience. Many times they're extremely empathetic. Mm-hmm. So instead of running away from your story, I would suggest that you embrace your poor injured self with open arms and accept it and try and look at the things that you've gained, because there are things that you've gained. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. And I believe that in addition to being aware, you need to get curious about it. Explore the different types of grief. Seek out resources. There are therapists. There are other ways. There's meditation. There's mindfulness. And if you truly have post-traumatic stress, then you actually do need a therapist. Also, one chapter of my book is on forgiveness, because we may have to forgive the people around us, but we may also have to forgive ourselves. Right. And this is an ongoing process. And one of my goals with this book is to change the dialogue about loss and adversity. Loss and adversity, they're going to happen to all of us. And the way we face them and what we gain from them can give us great value. So I would like to say that. The other thing that I really reiterate in my book is that everybody grieves in their own way, in their own time. And
so many people think, okay, there's a process, you got to go through step 1 through 6. Mm-hmm. No. I've experienced a deep loss, 2 great losses, 3 great losses for us this year. And I have not been able to really shed a tear. I don't know if I am, not to say comfortable, but I'm aware of transition and death and what happens. I was shocked because it was so sudden. Mm-hmm. Nobody expected. But that's what's happening now. I'm just saying that the Creator is calling them home and is not giving us any warning. It's not like we've had to go through this long illness with them and see them suffer. I mean, just poof, they're not waking up, Right. And so I want you brains to think about that, okay? How quickly something can be taken away from you, how precious life is, how you need to confront these things and say the things that you want to say to people. Forgive them, forgive yourself. Identify. Don't go through your whole life with if I would have, could have, should have. Okay? You really need to grab hold to this and embrace it, but in your own time, okay? Because I know it's a lot of work, and sometimes people don't, they feel if they bring up these memories that it's going to get worse for them instead of better, but you have no idea what is going to evolve from that. Again, I always tell you, 95% of your subconscious mind, you haven't even tapped into. And a lot of these things are suppressed and they're locked there. But they're no longer anything to be ashamed about, because we've got great authors that are writing about their story and telling their story and sharing it and giving you tools to use and great suggestions. Thank you so much for writing this book, Madonna. I think that it's brilliant. I'm so glad that you have jumped over that hurdle, that you're feeling comfortable enough to not only, write about it, but share it, and also have some consultations with people. Now, are you coaching as well?
I'm not coaching right now, but I am asking people to share their stories on my website. And I'm working on putting some programs together that could help people.
Well, we're going to talk offline, because I'm really looking to diving into doing some deep work with children in foster care, and also some women that are coming out of prison, reiterating into society, and they're re-engaging and reconnecting with their children. And there's a lot of shame there. There's a lot of discord. So maybe, me, you, and a couple other brilliant brains can get together, hold some seminars, talk about your book, use that as a template and a guideline for all of us to get better. Please tell my brains how to get in contact with you if they want to purchase the book, because everybody needs a copy, okay? And also if they want to connect with you and contribute to your stories on your webpage.
My book is available on Amazon. All you have to do is put in my name, and I'm going to spell that for you, because my website is my name, Madonna Treadway .com. And I'll do that in a minute, but also my books are available in Barnes & Noble, and I'm going to be doing a book signing at Bookstar at near Liberty Station on December 1st, in case anybody wants to come and meet me. So my website is my name, Madonna Treadway, MADONNA TR, E as in egg, A as in apple, D as in dog, WAY.com. And if you put my name in on Amazon, the book will pop up. It's my first book. So please feel free to connect. And I'm on social media as well. I'm on all of social media, so you can find me there. Check me out on Facebook. I'm doing some postings that might be helpful. And thank you so much for having me on, April.
Well, my brains love you here on The Edge, because you were open enough to, share yourself and share your story here on The Edge. And I thank you for letting this be your debut podcast, videocast. I think you did a phenomenal job. You're just so warm and beautiful, and your smile. I can't wait to meet you for coffee. She's my neighbor brain. She's here in San Diego. So we're going to have some coffee, and we're going to talk a little bit more and share the book. Remember that she's got a book signing coming up. All of her books can be purchased in all the major bookstores that's left on the planet, but there's always Amazon, and you can purchase them directly from her. Thank you so much for being here on The Edge with me and my brains. We appreciate you. We value you. This may be your first book, but I am sure that it will not be your last.
I hope not.
All right. Bye, brains.
Thank you.